Welcome to the Sacred Roots podcast. I am your host, Elie de Bosson, and I am a spiritual teacher, business mentor, energy healer, speaker, and the author of the new book, The Path of Femininity, The 6 Gifts of Your Sovereignty. This show is designed for every woman entrepreneur wanting to experience more flow, abundance, purpose, and impact, all while having a solid business and life. I love and adore to bridge spirituality and business, so if you're into both of these, welcome! You're at the right place. Welcome, my beautiful souls, to a new episode of the Sacred Roots podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Deborah Drummond, that actually lives in Vancouver. We're almost neighbors, right, Deborah?
Absolutely, just down the street.
Yeah. And Deborah, I see you as this multi-passionate person. You do so many things. You're passionate by so many things. You have a podcast, you have a face cream for a woman, you do chakra balancing, massages, you also publish books for women entrepreneurs that want to learn everything about network marketing. And you do lots of other things I'm sure that I have no idea about, right?
Maybe a few. Yes.
You want to introduce yourself to the audience, maybe?
Oh, well, you know what? I always say to people, I'm in health, wealth, and wellness. I really think that encompasses everything that I do, comes from a health and wellness perspective and empowerment. So I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. So when I give my resume, it sounds like so much for people. They're like, how do you do all that? But some of it I've done, you know what I mean? Like I started the first women's networking group in Vancouver when my daughter was 2 and she's now 28. And so it sounds like a lot, but it's just been one expansion after the other, right? So my heart and soul sits in holistic wellness. And so the face cream is a holistic product. You know, I help entrepreneurs. And so, you know, the podcast is all about entrepreneurship. It falls in a beautiful bucket, but I am a creative. I would say more than an entrepreneur, I'm a creative.
For sure. So I'm sure there are so many lessons that we could learn from you from a business perspective. But today we have chosen to speak about a topic that is a bit more sensitive, a bit more taboo, and we really want to lift the veil because every woman to a certain level has experienced a sort of abuse. And when we experience abuse, whether it's bullying when we were kids, like I was bullied when I was a kid too, I remember going back home, crying every day, not wanting to go back. But my parents were like, the school's really close, you're having good grades, you're going back. And it shaped my personality a lot because I became a real people pleaser as a result of that. And I didn't know who I was. I just was what people were expecting me to be. So that dimmed my light. And it took me a lot of time to reconnect with my light on a personal level and on a business level as well. So I think it's such an important topic to tackle because you know, we say little t or big T trauma really impacts us, and abuse is definitely part of those. And it can be a small abuse, but it can also be really high abuse. And you have a story to share with us about that.
Yes. And thank you for the allowance of having it come on, because I was, just sharing with you that this is a topic that I feel ready to share about. It's not like people don't know it, but I would say less than one hand of people that know it. And most people that have known me, that when I've been in the spotlight, say for the last 30 years, or take awards or have accomplishments or accolades or look from the outside in, which is what we do, right? As much as we understand that everyone walks their own path, sometimes we just don't know where that path started. And so for me, with my children being the age that they are and ready to maybe hear this conversation be shared, is that I am a woman who has recovered from pretty considerable domestic violence. This was prior to me having children. So that also makes it a little easier for me to share, I think, for myself. And it's not like I woke up one day and thought I'm going to share it. It's been seeping out a little bit over the last year, where I'm like, I actually wrote the foreword to a book of a woman colleague of mine who wrote about a different form of abuse, more, I believe it's called covert abuse, where there isn't any physical violence, but it's the emotional aspect of a domestic violence. So yes, I had 2 domestic violent relationships after having some experiences like that in my early years on the planet, I'll say. Yeah.
So, what do you think magnetized you to having relationship with these men that would then abuse you? What do you think in your life created that for your adult life?
Yeah. Well, that one is an easy one and maybe not an easy one, because if you look at my childhood, there was a very physically violent relationship with my sibling, my
Mm,
brother. So I think some of the brokenness or some of that, who knows at 3, 4, 8, 9, 10 years old, the conversations that are going on. I remember very clearly, it was interesting. I was sitting with this brilliant man who was talking about dynamics and coaching and what have you. We had a conversation and he was talking to an Olympian. And he said to her that she had won the Olympics. And he said, "When did you decide to win the Olympics?" And this was just a couple of weeks ago. And she's like, "When did you decide to become an Olympian and win at the Olympics?" And she said something like she was in grade 4 and the teacher pointed her out and it was a PE class and said, "You'll never be able to do this." Lily remembered saying, "I will win the biggest medal." She didn't say Olympics, but she was like, "I will, obviously the Olympics." And when he said that, it reminded me, and I don't know how old I was. I don't know how old I was. I mean, if I had to make a guess, it's somewhere around that maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I was like, I'm so out of here and I will never live like this again. So
mm,
obviously some of that brokenness started with that physical violence, which made the continuum of the physical violence seem probably not as dramatic as someone would see it from the outside. And I
mhm.
was also in a really vulnerable place. I had left home. I was dating someone who I thought was very protective, was going to protect me, had a persona of being protecting, very strong. And I had already had some brokenness. And so I was looking maybe for like a savior, someone that was going
Yeah.
to protect me, and actually didn't physically touch me for probably a year and a half. And when they did, it was very subtle and almost like, did that just happen? Was that inappropriate? Like, like grabbing someone's arm. Like,
Yeah.
was that a little tighter than I thought? Was that a little, and it was really, really subtle and it caused confusion, but there was a breakdown of my persona, which in that particular relationship happened. And so it was almost like by the time the violence started, I already didn't have the esteem or the accuracy to go, "Oh, this is so wrong." Like
Yeah.
someone who had not, yeah.
Do you think that that is done on purpose?
That's an interesting question because I guess that would be, I almost wanted to say that would be a question for the perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
And so did he do this on purpose because he intentionally wanted to make me weaker so that I couldn't? Or was he damaged himself and was repeating a pattern and didn't really know what he was doing? Did he intentionally set me up to be physically violent against me, or knowing, I think it's about power and control. And so he was in his, determined state to have power and control over me. And there was testing ground. If I go back, there was testing ground for sure. Like I grabbed her, she didn't do anything. I pushed her, she didn't do anything.
So I can
And
go
that
further.
actually that relationship got quite violent. I mean, I remember one night being scared for my life.
Oh, wow.
And well, he was living and I was there that night. And he was in the kitchen and he was drinking with his friends. And I could just feel it. I could just feel it. He had said something to me and I was like, oh, I'm in a really dangerous place. And there was the main floor to the house and then, a flight of stairs up to where his room was. And the only way out was because if I went down the stairs, he would have heard me, was to literally jump out of a window.
Oh,
And I
wow.
thought the chances of me breaking my leg are really high. And I thought, okay, once I get out the window, where do I go? And so I took that choice because I thought, I don't think I'm going to make it. And so I
Wow.
took it, didn't break my leg. I ran to a friend's. I actually called the police for the first time. And this person was known by the police. And this police officer was driving me home, which I don't know if it felt much safer to be there. The violence had stopped at home, but I don't know if it felt safe there. But he said to me, maybe you don't want to do this. Like maybe you want to live a little bit of a different life. I mean, honestly, I think I was 17.
Yeah, you were young.
So Yeah. So I remember that officer trying in the best of their ability to say, maybe you want to kind of
Change
exit
something.
stage left here. Yeah. But I didn't really know how to do that.
Of course, you were
Yeah.
so young. And
Hmm.
so you jumped out of the window, you ride to a police station, they brought you to your place. What happened then? Did he call you, message you? Did it create a chaos, or did you never hear about him again?
Oh no, it continued. So ironically, listening to this story, you think, oh my gosh, you should go, but it didn't end the relationship. It was the new environment that I had created. His family was my family. His friends were my friends. I remember his mother saying to me once, you're too good for my son. And she knew things that I didn't know, right? And
Yeah.
so it continued. It continued. That was the first of two domestic violent relationships. So I got out of that, but like that one was very dangerous to get out of.
So
Yeah.
when you're saying it continued, just like, I don't want to get into terrible details, but just for
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
to understand, he was hitting you, you would have bruises, he would throw you through the bedroom, or
Yeah. So there was a lot of, I would say, a lot of mental abuse, and the physical abuse was, there was just a lot of, you're not wearing that skirt, you're not that, you're not going out,
yeah.
I'm going out, you're here, you're that. Like when it was big. So for example, we live in Squamish. And so we went, a whole group of us went to Squamish. And I remember saying to everybody, like, I don't want him to drink very much. And nobody knew what happened. But in the middle of the night, he pushed me down a cliff at about maybe 2 in the morning. And it took me till 6 in the morning to climb back up with all of my ribs broken.
Oh
And
my
when I
God.
got up, everyone was like, what happened? And I was like, oh, I was just peeing and I fell off the side of the cliff. And then I got taken home. And of course, you can't do anything with broken ribs. And I probably sat lying up. And I was too ashamed. I was too embarrassed to tell anybody. Like
Okay.
I took on the shame. I took on you know, and I don't want to say it was because I came from a violent home, because I know that there's women that it's shocking when it happens and you don't know why you take it for whatever reason. But they make you believe that you kind of can't get out. Like for me, I was like, I can't get out. Like I can't get out. He knows everybody. He knows my friends. He knows this. No one will believe me. Or if they do believe me, they're going to side with him. Where am I going to go? How am I going to take care of myself? All those kind
Yeah,
of things.
you feel
So
stuck.
yeah, you feel stuck.
But you did
You
get
feel
out
stuck.
of the relationship in the end. So what pushed you to the other side and made you decide to leave?
Yeah. So he actually went to jail,
Oh,
and it gave me like a little perspective.
yeah.
And, but yet he still kind of had control. Like he still really came from a, large group of people. And so it gave me the ability to like break up, you know what I mean? But it was very, very nasty. He didn't take it easy. He didn't take it well. And honestly, the only way he stopped was because like I would go to my work and he would be there. I would go there and he would be there. So he kind of kept haunting me until he found another girlfriend.
So that's when he came out of jail.
Yeah.
And I guess he went to jail for something completely different, but just something that.
Yes.
Oh wow, that's how
Yeah.
did you feel after, having suffered from so much violence and then being stalked? You must have felt so unsafe.
I did. I think that it's the dance between you have a knowingness that you know this isn't right, but you also, once you don't leave the first time, I think it starts to compound shame and you make excuses, right? Like it was easy for me to make excuses in that relationship for his behavior because of how he was raised, or because this was in his past, or because he had this childhood, and also because he showed lots of love. Like as much as there was, I don't know if the word is hate, but as much as there was violence, there was this love, and it's dysfunctional, but it makes sense at the time.
Yeah.
And so I think I didn't look at him as so much the violence during the time. I looked at him and his childhood and his experiences, and as an empath and someone that forgives and someone that believes and all that stuff. And it was a lifestyle, this was this lifestyle, and there's just two knowingnesses inside you. And then knowing that you got to go, like you got to go. And then, but also knowing that like you feel like I felt like my life was
In danger.
seriously in danger.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of stories out there where that doesn't work out for people. And so you're really conscious of that. And he had a big position in our community. This is not someone that people were going to back me up necessarily, or I didn't feel that they were going to back him. He had more resources than me. And then the time came for me to go. And I did. And I went through that process, and it was pretty scary.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing all that and being super open and vulnerable. I'm sure it's touching a lot of women that are listening to you right now. So you then moved to another abusive relationship, you said, right?
Yes, I did. It sounds kind of crazy. I didn't right away, but I'd stayed in the same, I'm not going to say dysfunctional community, because there's a lot of those people that are my dearest friends today, but it was a community of, I don't think I was the only one this was, happening to. There was a lot of dysfunction. And so I moved on. His family stayed in touch with me. I stayed in touch with them. The break was really with him.
Yeah.
It was the same crowd that we all kept, and I worked at a nightclub and I saw everybody every night and all that kind of stuff. And I went into a healthier relationship after that. And then it was the relationship after that, actually, that again, ironically, I didn't see it coming. And it was very, I'm not going to say it's much of the same, but it was much of the same. Okay. Right. I don't think I stayed as long. And that situation when I left, very much the same personality, right? Very much the same personality, living the same lifestyle. Ironically, though, this situation, I couldn't blame on his home life a little bit, but not really. And I was a little wiser, but still the environment was just a really dangerous environment. It's like going to the same garden to pick your flowers from, right? It's like they're just, and then picking weeds. So that one was actually quite heavy as well. I did end up going into a women's transition home.
Oh, wow.
And having to leave my environment, that one was very much like that. And I had to go in transition home and kind of go into hiding. I was scared for my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there was no recovery in between for me. There was no one saying, hey, let's do some therapy, or you got out and you saved yourself and wow. And you're happy about that. But you keep living life. You got bills to pay and And I was on my own. I mean, I probably have been living on my own since I was about 17.
So then at the time you were what, 20, 21?
19, maybe
19.
Yeah. 19, 20, 21. Yeah. And in that relationship, the second relationship, what made me realize I was in a dysfunctional relationship to that degree, because again, it was occasional, not every day, was that I left the environment. I stopped working at the club. I had a spiritual awakening, actually.
Okay.
I went out very late one night. Well, you get off work at 3 a.m. So, me and my girlfriend, we went out and we went partying with the bands, because that's what you do. And so we partied with the bands, got home at 5 or 6 in the morning. Not unusual. People think, oh, wow, 6 in the morning. Well, we worked till 2, you know what I mean? So it was kind of going out for dinner. So we came home and, we had been partying and what have you and having fun. And so she's passing out on the couch and I was just about to go to bed. And I went into the bathroom, whether to brush my teeth or take off my makeup, I don't really remember. And I was staring at the mirror because, over the sink. Yeah. And the mirror went black. I mean, pitch black.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been 8 seconds or 8 minutes, but it was enough to literally horrify me. I couldn't see anything. And it was just done. I called into work the next day and I said, I'm not coming back. And it was the owner of the club. And I was I was a prominent, person in 2 clubs going back and forth, working there. And I love music. If you know anything about it, I love music and I just love that. And so I can't say it was a nasty situation I was leaving in terms of the club, but I said, I'm not coming back. And he's like, you have the flu? And I'm like, no, I'm never coming back.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? I'm like, I'm never coming back. Like, it scared me. I don't know why. I know why it happened. I mean, we're all older and we grow up, we know, but I don't know why that incident made me quit my work. I don't know how I correlated those two, but it was like, I'm done.
You
And
just had a
ironically,
knowing inside that that was
yes,
the right thing to
yeah,
do.
yeah. Now here's the interesting thing. So I decided to change my life completely. And that person that I just finished talking about, so we had been dating and it was really violent and da 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 da. And then we broke apart. And then I'm moving along. I was actually living at my girlfriend's because we had broken up. And then I had this epiphany and I decided to change my life. And then I invited him back in my life because I thought I had solved the problem. Because I clearly thought the problem was me. Why did I think the problem was me? Because it happened to me. You know, it happened to me then. It happened to me when I was younger. So, you know, I think this is a really interesting point because this is something I still have to work through to this day. Is that when there's things that happen, I go, well, I'm the common denominator. There must be something wrong with me. That has been some of the residual. And I have to say to myself, don't take this on. This is not your stuff. I just recently had a situation happen and I had like 3 of my friends go, don't take this on. And I literally went to that place of, yeah, but it happened to me. So there must be a part in it. They're like, Yeah. Sometimes it's not like that. And this is not a violent one. This was just a situation. They were like, this clearly was not yours. Sometimes we just are in the path, you know? So anyways, I invited that person back into my life because I thought the problem was me. So now I'm not going to the club scene. My life is changing. I'm reading different books. I'm going to classes with women. I'm reading John Bradshaw, Healing the Shame That Binds You. I mean, we're talking, you know, I'm a little older, right? So yeah. John Bradshaw was coming out at that time and personal development was just starting and he kind of started it. I mean, honestly, I think it was still Phil Donahue on TV, you know, I think Oprah might've been on TV. I don't even know. So obviously this happened in my 20s and I'm in my 50s. And so I started to find myself and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so amazing. I'm going to get healthier. I'm going to have this great life. And so is he. And so is he. And so he came back in my life and we moved in together and there was no violence. And I was like, this is amazing. And I'm like this and like that. And I'm getting together and I'm exercising and I'm looking at becoming an entrepreneur and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden the violence started again. And it was perplexing to me. And I was like, I don't know. Now there's no glass of wine after work. There's none of that. I'm like completely like, I'm like, no, I'm not having any drinks. And now this is happening to me and I'm in a real life. And I was like, oh, and it was shocking. It was kind of more scary. And I said to my girlfriend, I need to get out because the night before he had kind of like had me up against the wall and I thought I was going to die.
Oh, wow. And
so he went to work the next day and we literally had movers come and clean out the house. And I went and stayed at her place and he showed up there I'll just say in a very violent state.
Yeah.
I went into a women's recovery home. And the interesting thing, again, we're talking years ago and I was so grateful it was there, but I came in, I stayed there for 4 days by myself. No one really talked to me. A couple of people came and said, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. But I didn't know what to do and I didn't know how to do it. And so then I just kind of left.
Oh, so you only stayed 4 days at the woman's recovery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I left. I never went back to him and I went on and found ways to be able to keep him at bay, you know, but yeah, no, that was very dangerous. He was showing up at my mother's house looking for me. He was, yeah, it was pretty stalky. And there's other parts to that, you know, that got pretty crazy, but I somehow weathered that storm.
It's intense. It's intense. Thank you so much for sharing all that and being so honest. So we're now 30 years later, 25, 30 years later, and you're saying that one of the residuals is that you still feel guilty or take responsibility for certain things. Can you share with us how, in hindsight, it shaped you and made you stronger maybe, but also gave you these other residuals? I'm sure there are other things that you still have in your life that are coming from these times.
Well, you know what I think? I mean, I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done 30 years of personal development. I got into personal development. You know, I always say that, you know, you can only take someone as far as you've gone. So I know what it's like to go to the extreme of your safety. I know what it's like to not have any. I know what it's like to build it. I think that, when I made that decision when I was younger to kind of leave that house and have a different life and build a different life, and I really did. And I think it kind of broke me, but gave me inner strength at the same time, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And so I believe that there's a colleague of mine, he's a psychiatrist actually. His clients are mostly CEOs. And he said to me, I don't know if I've ever met anybody, like seriously, with the capacity that these people take on. I don't know if I've ever met anybody with more resilience. He's like, you're completely resilient. And so one of the gifts has been resilience, right? One of the gifts has been resilience. I have the ability to go all in on something with everything that I have because of how much I've been stretched.
Yeah.
There's times where people are like, oh, I don't know how you can do that. And I'm like, girlfriend, you have no idea what I've gone through. And I don't think about it every day. I don't even think about it every year, but I do know that. So some of the great stuff is, this is why I can probably be the entrepreneur that I am. I can handle things. I can take care of people. I can help them through challenging times. I have a vast resource to deep resilience. And so completion of projects. I have a great relationship with myself. Like I can talk to myself and I can pamper. I went through a lot of recovery, so I can pamper myself and I love myself. And it was a journey of self-loving. And people say to me, in my business, I have some titles that people would associate to success. And they're like, how do you get there? And I'm like, you just keep going. You don't give up. And so these experiences, I could have easily collapsed. Honestly, at one point, it was really dangerous. Like he was looking for me, when he was trying to find me, I was in a recovery home. He was looking around town for me with a gun in his hand. Like that's the story I got. So it was very dangerous. So I know the extreme, and then also having to create inner safety for me. Like the dialogue of, I'm going to be okay. This is going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So tap into it. So I think it gave me a lot of resources. To my detriment, one of the ones I think that I shared with you is taking things on, like I just shared. Yeah. Sometimes I feel broken when other people wouldn't necessarily think something would break me. I've had to learn a lot about forgiveness. I've had to learn a lot of forgiveness. Now, both these people they're not in my life, but they're still in that circle. One of them came to me at one point in his personal recovery to apologize. And I said, I feel like the apology it wasn't very warranted. I'm like, I think maybe you need to go just do whatever you need to do, go in counseling. And then the other person, we came to a place with it. Years later, we actually had conversation and we came to a place with it. And I could call that person today if I wanted to.
Okay.
So that's pretty interesting that both those people now, I won't call that person today, and I don't have a whole lot of reason. But if we saw each other at a wedding or a funeral, I could do it without my gut being in my throat. I could do it without needing to have venom or revenge. I could do it with, I'm glad it's not me. And I know that the person that actually literally came looking for me with a gun has been in a relationship with someone for a very long time and never touched her. And so I think that might have been part of their journey. I don't know. But I think the other part that I said is that for me in these 25 or 30 years or whatever it is, 35 years, I've pretty well been either with a coach or a trainer. I've done lots of therapy. At one point, I went and did 2 months live-in. I did a live-in therapy, I think with 8 other women. We did group therapy. We did individual therapy. It was all on child development, personal development, all the stuff that kind of lends to that. And for me, just knowing that I had control over some of that stuff and just rewiring. Yeah. I think that's a long-winded answer. I don't know if I gave you what you're looking for.
Absolutely. I think it's beautiful that you devoted yourself so much to healing yourself and really honoring what you went through and all the pain that you had and all the fear that you had and trying to heal that in order to feel safe again. Because now when we look at you, we see that beautiful blonde woman that has a lot of businesses and a lot of ideas. And of course, we couldn't guess all the trauma that you went through. So it really shows that you brought yourself back to really a place of inner safety, strength, self-love, and power, which is beautiful and very inspiring. So there might be in the audience, who knows, women that are also suffering from abuse, but they also think it's their fault or they don't know how to get out of it. What would your advice be to them?
Right. Well, yeah, as a woman who literally was scared for her life, like I remember being scared for my life, and the fear about if I actually did leave or express myself. I mean, isn't that where some of the stuff trickles now for me?
Yeah.
Is there's some residual around if I express myself, I try to game plan. So I was the person that was obviously game planning a lot. My abuse with my brother was from maybe 2 till I was 16. So there was 14 years there. And then there was another chunk of my time where I was always trying to forecast their next move or pre-protect myself,
Yeah.
navigate through it. So what I would say to someone, if they're in that, the time that I got the most support was when I broke silence and told somebody. Even to this day, I am 56 years old, and I must have been 16 or 17 when that police officer, I can still picture him trying to help me. Right. So there are resources. Look, at going to the police in the circle that I was in was dangerous enough. Right. But I think just going to somewhere where you feel safe and looking for resources. And I know that there's so many resources. The other thing was I felt like I would have nothing. I didn't know how I was going to take care of myself. I didn't know financially. I didn't know emotionally. I thought I was going to lose all my friends and all of that. And I think you want to get to that place where if that's really what it was going to take, if you're going to lose it, you're probably going to lose it anyway in your mind. You're probably not going to lose it. There's going to be someone there. There's associations, there's people, call me, like I'm happy to be that. But I think if you can have an ally, because you're no longer seeing the abuse in the way someone else would see the abuse.
Yeah.
I would see the abuse justified. It would make sense to me. I believed on some level because there had been the demeaning, right? Like, so you're really going to wear your skirt that short? Like that, those comments made me feel like I had a responsibility in it. And honestly, I got to the place where the only responsibility I had was to leave. And from that point on, just know that you're not alone. Like that's probably why I'm at this place now, because people would not even closely look at my life and think that this was something that I experienced, right? It's going to be a little shocking for a lot of people. And I also want to say that I did recover and I got the right counseling and I made a new circle of friends and I started my business and I did heal and to the point where I could help heal others. And I was able to financially sustain myself and very much financially sustain myself. And I was able through the course of the last while to travel freely, not look over my shoulder, not worry about what I wear, be able to look this person who wanted my forgiveness and say, no, I'm not ready, and be okay with it. We're all supposed to forgive and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, not happening yet, sailor. You know what I mean? Like, go get your forgiveness and from a therapist, like go get what you need there, but don't come to me. I'm not the one that's going to let you off the hook. You go let yourself off the hook. Go do your work. Go do your work. And I was like, ooh, I feel really good about that.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about forgiveness. There's, I don't know if you've read the book of Shaman Durek.
No.
Spirit Hacking. He published a book a few months ago and it's a bestseller now. And there's a whole part in the book where he talks about forgiveness. And he says that forgiveness is bullshit, that we shouldn't forgive people because when we forgive people, it's as if we were forgetting. And by actually remembering what happened to us, we honor us. We honor ourselves, we honor what happened to us, and then we can decide to really fuel that into maybe something better.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, it was a revelation for me to be able to say that and be okay with it because, we believe things, right? That's the other thing, the challenge that I had around, you always play a part in everything and da, 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 da. And, so whether I'd come from a home where there was physical violence before or not, whether there was a weakened state, I mean, sometimes people can just get into your head. Like, I'm an empath, kind-hearted, loving woman. I'm by nature going to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially at 16 or 17 or 19 or 20 or 25 years old, before I tapped into my own power, right? So sometimes these things just take you by surprise. So I don't want to make it sound like that. But yeah, the forgiveness was really powerful in that I get to do it on my terms if I choose to do it, and to what degree I choose to do it.
Of course.
Right? And that doesn't make me an awful person. Yeah. It just makes me know myself. It just makes me know myself. And it was funny because there's a woman that I do exchanges with, and we're both intuitive when we do clients. And when we massage each other, it's about 5-6 hours. And now you got to think I'm 56. And this stuff happened with my brother from the time I was 2 till I was about 16. And then I reacted to one of his, I protected myself in a way at 16 that did not allow him to ever touch me again. I think he was at that point scared for himself. But she said to me, she did a treatment on me. She goes, "Oh, you have to forgive your brother." And the first thing I said is, I'm like, no, I don't think so. Yeah. There was 2 letters I said. And I said, I don't think so. And I'm not prepared to do that kind of work. Like, I've done so much work. And then she's like, "Well, the guides are saying that it's time." And then shortly after that, I had a conversation with my mother, and I said something about my brother. And she's like, "Yeah, he's suffered from depression all these years." And I'm like, "What?" Like, I didn't know, because we're not necessarily close. And then I know his position. I know his financial situation. I know his life. And I thought, I think this has eaten him up, because he's tried a number of times to come to me, and I just haven't been ready. I'm like, "Please go to a counselor." And so I wrote him a letter, and it was more like, it wasn't about forgiving him, but it was letting him know that I had enough forgiveness for him to let himself off the hook.
Yeah.
And I sent him that letter, and I sent him a messenger saying, "I sent you a letter." He never to this day got it. But interestingly, it's just very interesting. But I don't know if I felt any different, but I did feel empathy for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, he's raised good kids. He's never, ever, been that man again that I know of. And
so
I'm like, it's time for him to let himself off the hook. So
I
don't know. It comes when it comes.
Journey. That's the journey of his soul. So maybe that's going to sound a little weird, but now that you've done so much healing on yourself, do you think, or can you say that your soul actually chose to experience this in this lifetime, maybe in order to learn empathy at a deeper level?
I think that's an interesting concept, and I don't think it's a new concept. I remember my Ayurvedic teacher when myself and my daughter's father were separating. And for anyone listening to this, the people I'm talking about are not the fathers of my children, just in case people want to try to put something together that's not there. And I remember there was difficulties in the separation. And I remember she said to me, Chloe chose to come through your 2 souls. So she chose her father and she chose you. And I'm like, God, she kind of made a wrong choice. You know what I mean? I was like, because it was a difficult separation. And so I remember giving me another perspective. And so did I, or didn't I, did my soul? That's a tough one for me to answer. I believe I've said many times that what I've experienced has made me a better person, a bigger person, a more resilient person. I can help people going through. Do I believe that with every fiber of my being? Am I the person that says, I'm glad those things happened because they made me who I am? No,
I'm
not.
That's something.
And I know that's a different perspective. What I am glad is that because it happened, it has made me more empathetic. I can understand. It's given me a higher level of resilience. I'm glad I survived, so, people are like, "Oh, I wouldn't change a thing in my life." I'm like, I would. I would. I'd change that. There's a couple other things I'd change too. Now, I may not have all the reasons. When I'm standing on stage one day and I'm sharing and a woman comes up to me and says, "Thank you so much. I needed to hear it." It will feel confirming and it might feel worth it in that moment. But am I glad that I ran for my life or jumped out of a house hoping not to break my leg? Yeah. So I'm kind of mixed on that one. I get it. I understand it. I accept it. I accept that we have things that we go through and our soul chooses. But I also know that the dysfunction I experienced preceded the dysfunction I would allow.
Yeah. It is definitely a hard question. You know, I
Yeah.
also went through some abuse as a child. And then in my first marriage, it was not physical abuse, it was more emotional and mental abuse. But yeah, do we choose to live this? Do we create it? Is it a reflection of who we are? I think we don't always have clarity on all these things, and we don't always have to have clarity.
Yeah.
It happens and it made you stronger, and maybe it allowed you to be such an amazing entrepreneur thanks to that, because it taught you so much resilience and being full on. But then sometimes we don't need to have an answer to all these questions as well.
Yeah. I sit between yes, and I sit between the understanding of maybe,
Yeah.
like, maybe it happened. And then I also know that great learning did come from it. And I am one of the survivors because there's people that aren't. And so,
And also,
um,
great learnings came from it because you allowed it and you transformed it into opportunities, which not everybody
yes.
does. You could have stayed in the victim mentality because you were a victim, like we can really say that. And you could have
Yeah.
stayed in that energy of I've been through so much and I'm broken. And it would have
Yeah.
definitely been understandable too. So learning came out of it because you chose that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much for sharing your story with so much honesty, openness, vulnerability. It really touched me. And I'm sure it's going to touch a lot of women who are listening to us. So if these women want to connect with you, or maybe get your beautiful face creams, or listen to your
Well, yes,
podcasts, where can they find you?
absolutely. So, and I open the conversation for any of that. And if there's someone that wants me to come speak to one person or a group of people, this is a time where I've chosen that it's okay and it's time to share this information.
Yep.
And then it really ties into the empowerment of everything that I do. And whether it's, the holistic products, or whether it's the trainings or the meditations or the work, then they can come and hang out and explore more either way. So, or someone wants to talk to me privately, but my email is super easy. It's Deb, DEB, at debdrummond.com, DEBDRUMMOND.com. So people can email me there. Honestly, I'm on Facebook as Deborah Drummond from Vancouver. And I think you'll be putting some things.
Yes, you can
there.
send me some links,
Yeah.
and I'll put them in the show notes of this
Yeah.
episode. Thank you so much, Deborah. This was a beautiful, intense, but beautiful conversation. And again, thank you so much for your vulnerability. And I'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.